Titanic. The story that captured the world. On the night of April 15, 1912, the largest and most luxurious ship in the world at the time, the Titanic, crashed into an iceberg and sank to the bottom of the Atlantic. More than 1,500 people lost their lives in what became the most famous shipping disaster of all time. The story of the unsinkable ship has since been retold in thousands of books, television programs, and movies. It's a tale that is full of drama, glamour, and dreams of new beginnings, and acts of great heroism as well as cowardice. Building the Titanic. Once the White Star Line decided it needed a new megaship, it was clear it would be built by the company's regular shipbuilder, Harland and Wolff in Belfast, Northern Ireland. Just over 3 years after construction began, the Titanic was ready. It had cost a whopping 1.5 million euros, around $260 million in today's money. But White Star Line could look forward to the profits they would make from ferrying all those rich passengers across the Atlantic. Or so they thought. The unsinkable ship. The tragedy of the Titanic seemed particularly shocking because many people at the time thought the ship was so huge that nothing in the world would be able to sink it. It also had an ingenious safety system with a series of watertight compartments designed to keep it afloat should it hit anything. A White Star Line brochure even stated that the ship was designed to be unsinkable. While a passenger wrote to his relatives before boarding, "We are changing ships and coming home in a new unsinkable boat." It proved to be anything but. Loading the Titanic. The Titanic's vast size meant that it could carry a huge amount of goods, provisions, and cargo. Much of this was needed just for the journey across the Atlantic. Astronomical amounts of food and drink were required for the passengers and crew, including 36 tons of potatoes, 34 tons of fresh meat, and 40,000 fresh eggs. The ship's giant holds were filled with passengers' luggage, as well as huge amounts of commercial cargo being transported to businesses in the United States. Last but not least, the Titanic was also an official mail ship. Manning the Titanic. There were nearly 900 crew members on the Titanic during its maiden voyage. The deck crew, including the captain, officers, and storemen, were responsible for navigating in the day-to-day running of the ship. Engineers, boilermen, firemen, and electricians kept the Titanic's thunderous engines running. Guests were taken care of by the victualling crew of stewards and galley staff, while entertainment was provided by 2 small bands. The journey begins. By early April 1912, after 3 years of intense construction, the Titanic was finally ready to enter service as a commercial ocean-going liner. Following a short sea trial near Belfast, the ship set sail to pick up provisions and passengers for its first trip from Southampton in the UK to New York in the United States. Not everything went as planned, and the ship narrowly avoided crashing into another boat in Southampton. Indeed, after the tragedy, many people came forward claiming to have had premonitions of the disaster. But for the first few days, all seemed to be well as the ship made stops in France and Ireland before heading out into the Atlantic Ocean. Powering the Titanic. As well as being the top luxury liner, the Titanic was also a monstrous machine. To power the craft, its shipbuilder, Harland and Wolff, had built some of the biggest engines and propellers yet. But contrary to rumors at the time, the ship was not designed to be supremely fast. People thought that the White Star Line wanted the Titanic to break the record for a transatlantic crossing set by Mauritania a few years before. In fact, the ship's top speed was around 4 knots, 4 miles per hour or 7 kilometers an hour, slower than its rivals. Its main appeal was splendor, not speed. The luxury liner. The Titanic was a floating palace with first-class interiors that rivaled the grandest hotels. Its lavish facilities including restaurants, saloons, libraries, special walking areas called promenades, and a heated swimming pool. Everything was specially built for the ship and of the highest quality, from the crystal chandeliers and gold-plated light fittings to the bone china, crockery, and Moorish-style tiles in the Turkish bath. All aboard first class. The White Star Line spent a fortune turning the Titanic into the finest and most luxurious liner of its time to attract some of the world's wealthiest passengers. The first-class passenger list included several members of the British aristocracy as well as leading politicians, businessmen, and industrialists. Many brought along teams of servants. A basic first-class ticket cost €30, about $1,675 in today's money, while a top-of-the-line suite was a whopping €870, around $48,732 in today's money. There were 329 first-class passengers on the Titanic. Second and third class facilities. Facilities in second class may not have been as good as those in first, but they were still much better than the first class facilities of many other ships of the period. Cabins were comfortable and spacious. The dining room served generous four-course meals, and there was an oak-paneled library and a promenade deck to relax on. The Titanic was also the first ship to install an electric elevator in second class. Things were a little rougher in third class. Couples, families, and single women stayed in small, cramped cabins, while single men shared communal dormitories. Public spaces were very basic. Traveling in second and third class. The 285 second-class passengers on Titanic were mainly business people. They included teachers, priests, farmers, and carpenters, as well as maids and chauffeurs for those traveling in first class. Most had paid about €13, around $152 in today's money, for their ticket. The majority of the 710 passengers in the cheapest third-class accommodation were not going on vacation. Most had a one-way ticket, costing €7, around $99 today, and a simple plan to start a new, better life in North America. Crossing the Atlantic. Between the afternoon of Thursday, April 11th, when the Titanic left Ireland, and the evening of Sunday, April 14th, the ship made good progress across the Atlantic. The weather was calm, and passengers spent their time getting to know the ship and making use of the facilities, taking the sea air and writing letters home. As the ship approached the northwest Atlantic, temperatures began to drop. The Titanic received a number of warnings that icy seas lay ahead. Still, no one believed the ship was in any real danger. Danger ahead. As evening approached, conditions in the Atlantic became increasingly icy. Now, some minor precautions were taken. The captain ordered the ship to head 14 miles south before turning toward New York, but he did not reduce its speed. However, lookouts up on the crow's nest were asked to keep an eye out for large icebergs. It was a clear night, and the crew believed there would be lots of time to spot any possible dangers and to get out of the way if necessary. Disaster strikes. At around 11:40 p.m., the Titanic struck a large iceberg. At first, no one realized how serious the impact was. Most survivors remembered feeling a bump, but nothing more. However, unknown to everyone on board, the iceberg had done enormous damage to the underside of the ship, and it had begun to sink. Once the realization set in, officers sent up distress rocket flares while the telegraph operators tried desperately to contact any ships in the area. Abandoned ship. After the impact, Captain Smith and the ship's designer, Thomas Andrews, inspected the damage below decks. Realizing how serious the situation was, the captain ordered the lifeboats to be prepared and for passengers to start evacuating the ship. Unfortunately, there weren't enough lifeboats for everybody on board. A lack of training, since there hadn't been a lifeboat drill, and a general air of confusion and panic meant that many boats were launched before they were full. A ship destroyed. The Titanic, the unsinkable ship, slipped beneath the waves just 2 hours and 40 minutes after its deadly collision with the iceberg. The people on the lifeboats now had to wait. They drifted in the freezing darkness, hoping that someone had received the ship's distress signals and was on the way to rescue them. Those who hadn't made it onto the lifeboat either went down with the ship or jumped into the water. A few were able to swim their way to a lifeboat, but most were quickly overcome by the cold and died in the icy black waters. Rescuing the survivors. The closest ship to the Titanic, the Californian, didn't respond to its distress signals. Thankfully, the Carpathia, which was nearly 55 miles away, did. Having received the messages sent by the Titanic's telegraph operators, the Carpathia's captain ordered his crew to head to the site of the disaster to try and rescue as many passengers as possible. Around 4 hours later, the Carpathia had arrived on the scene. It managed to save 706 people. The other 1,517 passengers of the Titanic died. Arrival in New York. 3 days after the disaster on April 18th, the Carpathia delivered the survivors of the Titanic into New York. There was a crowd of 40,000 people to greet them. The Titanic's distress signals had been picked up in Canada, and word of the disaster had soon spread. In fact, it quickly became the biggest story of the year, dominating newspaper headlines around the world for weeks. Inquiries into the events began almost immediately in the U.S. and UK. Both put forward recommendations that have prevented a similar tragedy from happening again. Victims and survivors. It's generally accepted that there were 706 survivors of the Titanic. However, it's not known for certain how many died because the ship's crew and passenger lists are thought to have been inaccurate. The U.S. inquiry put the number at 1,517. What is known for certain is that more third-class passengers died than first-class ones. As the ship went down, the crew went to work saving the first-class and second-class passengers, while those in third class were largely left to look after their own survival. Discovering the Titanic. For 73 years, the wreck of the Titanic lay undiscovered and undisturbed at the bottom of the ocean. Various attempts had been made to find it, without success. Part of the problem was that the Titanic's final location had not been accurately recorded in 1912, so everyone was looking in the wrong place. It was also so far down that for many decades the technology to reach it simply didn't exist. Finally, in 1985, a team led by the U.S. underwater archaeologist Robert Ballard found the ship using an unmanned submersible called Argo. The most famous ship in the world. Over 100 years since the event, the sinking of the Titanic continues to have a powerful hold on the public imagination. The story has taken on a new life in popular culture, retold in many different ways, in films, TV shows, musicals, and video games. Thousands of books have been written to catalog every detail of the tragedy and to tell the tales of almost everyone involved. The name Titanic itself has become a byword for a disaster caused by human arrogance.